Hello. Hi. This is the presentation of the midterm report. It's about the project proposal of system engineering on a virtual reality video game system study by Zetian Qiu, ZQ516. First of all, is my introduction of the proposal of this paper. In this case study, we will treat the virtual reality video game industry as one single system, which includes the hardware system, which about like the VR headset, the consoles of or the PC which VR games can run on it, and the controllers. And about the software system, and those system will contain subsystems, including the designing and testing of each part. To be particular, in this paper, the future and the life cycle of virtual reality technology will also be discussed. And there are some kind of VR devices and some sort of software and games which have been applied in the market. For example, in this paper, we will use those existing products such as Index or Virtual Boy as an example to show the structure of the VR game industry, both in like beneficial, like the advantage and the disadvantage of the VR game system compared to the traditional video game system. First of all, let's talk about like the background of virtual reality game system. The definition of virtual reality is kind of artificial experience which simulated by machine, and it can be similar to or completely different from the real world. Most of those experience is produced by a set of VR system which contains the hardware and software part. The VR game system in this paper refers to one kind of application of virtual reality in entertainment application, which is the VR game system. For example, this is the VR game system, the hardware of the VR game system. Currently, the standard VR system uses either virtual reality headset or multi-project environment to generate realistic images, sounds, and other sensations that simulate a user's physical presence in a virtual environment. For example, the Valve Index, we can see here is the headset of the Valve Index, and this is the two controllers, and this is actually two speakers, but the speakers are not actually the essential part of the VR game system, but the headset and the controllers are the most important part in the hardware of the virtual reality system. Most of the VR game system in this paper contains the headset and controllers. However, the software, which refers to the video games, the VR video games, and the consoles or the PC, like the one which run on the software and the VR games, are also important part of the VR game system. This technology integrates the latest development of computer graphics, computer simulation, artificial intelligence, sensing, display, and networking parallel processing technologies. This is a high-tech simulation system generated by computer technology, so it's born from the computer technology. Actually, it comes from like the birth of the VR system also got a really big connection with the graphic cards, the graphic performance of the video games. Then let's talk about the history of the VR virtual reality system. Before the 1915s, the virtual reality system is like an idea instead of a real thing, seen like an idea in the scientific fiction novels. In the Stanley G science fiction novel Panamanian spectators, which is considered as the first science fiction which worked to explore the virtual reality. This short story describes the details in detail of the virtual reality system based on smell, touch, and goggles. After the 1915, the first achievable VR system was developed. Actually, in the Stanley G. Morton Halleck wrote in 1915 of an experience theater that could compress all the senses in an effective manner, and in 1962 he built a prototype of his vision. Then the virtual reality system had a good development. The first video game, Pong, in 1958 was invented. Although the first video game, Pong, was run on an oscilloscope, which can only display the simplest images, people can now wait to play the video games on the other master visual, also including the VR system. However, the development of the VR system just stuck because of the Atari shock in 1983. Actually, Atari was the first video game company which founded the research lab in 1982, but the lab was closed after 2 years due to the Atari shock. The video game crash of 1983 was happened because of the Atari's loss of publishing control, and this results that most of the video game system, including hardware and software companies in North America, has been crashed until the beginning of the 21st century. And it also caused that all video game companies working on the consoles or publishing a specific department in their own company to check the content of those publishing video games. Because of the Atari shock in 1983, the video game industry in North America just crashed. So the center of the video game moved to Japan. Sega was the first Japanese video game which tried to develop the technology of VR game system. In 1991, Sega announced the Sega VR headset for arcade games and the Mega Drive console. It used LCD screen in stereo headphones and sensors that allows the system to track and react the movement of user's head. Because Sega is not only good at selling copies of video games, but also one of the biggest amusement arcade and video game consoles manufacturer. They developed their VR techniques and applied it upon their amusement arcades since that. In that period of time, PC or game console did not have superior performance compared to arcades. Then, after Sega entered the VR system, the Nintendo also get in. Because of the Atari's shock, Nintendo turned itself to be the biggest game company in this world at that period of time. As a figure show, Nintendo's Virtual Boy already got a kind of portable headset with a traditional controller, which is very similar to the modern VR game system. The player uses the controller as like a head-mounted display, placing their head against the eyepiece to see a red monochrome display. It still focused on the virtual display in 3D, but the technology of the 3D before 20,000 2000 was also a new technology. Some of the players in that period of time still thought that 2D display is the only way for the video games. The Virtual Boy was panned by critics and was a commercial failure even after repeated price drops. Its failure is believed to be due to its high price. Its display screen is unbelievable. Its awful 3D effect and lack of true probability. And it will also cause some kind of health problem. And it have a lot of low quality games. In the 21 after enter the 21st century, for the first decade of 21st century, public and investment were indifferences to the commercially available VR technology. They are more excited about the 3D performance. However, after the rapid evolution of graphic display technology, industry knows that this is a time for developing VR techniques. 2010 sees a new wave for the VR game system. Lots of companies start their project of VR game system. The Oculus Rift was seen as the first modern VR game system with many playable VR games. In the 2012, the Rift is presented for the first time at the E3 video game trade show by Carmack. Thus, the VR game system, after decades of silences, come back in the view of video game players. Meanwhile, because of John Carmack, known as the father of modern 3D games, the industry got their confidence on the VR game set. Actually, Facebook just purchased the Oculus VR in 2014. Then the biggest game company in this world, Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo, all of them just entered the VR game system industry. However, Nintendo has faced the failure of the Virtual Boy, so they just feel bad about it. But the Sony in 2014, Sony announced the Project Morpheus, its code name for the PSVR, a virtual reality set for the PlayStation 4 video games console. Until now, the video game companies such as Valve, Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, Sega are still the most encouraged company in developing VR game system. The development of the virtual reality game system. Just like the figure shows, the hands of the game character are directly controlled by the VR game system controller, and game player can use their own finger to achieve a lot of actions, such as move the finger, throw away grenades, or even toss juggling during the play process, which can never be achieved in traditional video game. This screenshot is from the game Half-Life Alyx. Currently, the well-indexed with Half-Life Alyx stands for the best model for modern VR game system and game. Concept development 3.1 needs analysis. After decades of development of technology in graphic display, the VR system seems to be a achievable way of entertainment. Players are dreaming that one day they can really enter the fantasy world built by video games and movies. Modern VR game systems show that this dream can be possible, and such an experience is one that players can never get from the traditional video game. Meanwhile, the technology of VR game system have been developed into a higher level that are able to satisfy people's requirement of VR experience. That means people's demands on the VR system are really high. The concept exploration. A reasonable VR game system requires harmony interaction between hardware and software. For example, the Half-Life Alyx is the first AAA video game which only serves VR game system, and because of its perfect performance, it costs sold out of the well index and in most of country, and even the well index is much more expensive than a traditional console, and it requires a high performance PC to run on it. A good VR game can have a huge influence on the sale of VR game system. The success of well index and Half-Life Alyx shows that players are happy to pay more money for a better experience. 3.3 Concept definition. It has an optimistic future where everything just begun. It will have a much better performance on showing a wonderful virtual world to players than the traditional video game. The cost of developing the VR game system is higher than traditional one, but as the cost of developing the traditional game tends to be higher and higher. And meanwhile, the cost of developing VR game system will decrease as the technology development. Thus, the cost of VR game system will eventually be the same and even lower than the traditional video games. After all, this analysis of VR game system based on the concept definition, the development of the new system can be made. However, there are still some challenges for the VR system, such as the physical space requirement of VR game system. It requires at least 5 to 10 meters square of clear room to operation. Otherwise, you might get hurt, get injured during the game. And another problem is about health and safety. There are many health and safety considerations of virtual reality. For example, the virtual reality sickness, when person's exposure to a virtual environment causes symptoms similar to the motion sickness of sepsis.